Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Max Verstappen with a statement today suggesting the pre-Singapore status quo will be returning in full force for the rest of the season. 6/10 on the rest of the grids hit today, especially his own teammate Sergio Perez. We'll get into that in a few minutes time, saying the haters around the technical directive could go suck on an egg. Interesting turn of phrase for sure, but it looks not out of the realms of possibility that Max could lap everyone tomorrow all the way up to the McLarens. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Now there's a few updates of the day as well. Firstly, AlphaTauri confirm Tsunoda and Danny Rick will be the drivers through 2024 next season. As it stands, no Liam Lawson on the grid, but we will talk about Logan Sargeant in a second because he's the only driver as yet not to be reaffirmed. Now, I think Yuki needs to start thinking about pledging his allegiance more so to Honda than to Red Bull. Now, we know Red Bull Honda have the relationship, but from 2026, Honda are going to work exclusively with Aston Martin. Red Bull apparently weren't even particularly keen to keep Yuki on, and look, if they don't think that Yuki is max teammate potential, then having a fourth year at AlphaTauri is pretty out of the norms, let's just say. Does he deserve it? Absolutely. Like, Yuki's a great driver, and but that's not always how Red Bull operates. So they were apparently not keen on signing him again, but Honda stepped in and said, let's get this deal done. Ricciardo comes along for Ricciardo reasons. There's an argument. Was it Scott McLaughlin, I think, said yesterday, IndyCar driver, that he would put Ricciardo in the Red Bull seat, and he would then put Lawson and Yuki in the AlphaTauris. But Liam Lawson without a drive after another pretty impressive Saturday from him again today, it's got to be said, and there is still one seat available for next season. Before we get into that, there was a bit more drama actually on the Max Verstappen lack of penalty, shall we say, during the Singapore Grand Prix on the Saturday there. And as Hamilton says, is he pleased with the stewards admitting they made a mistake? Of course, admitting a mistake doesn't do anything. Not really. How many years? The rule has been the same for ages, you know. I think we need to start looking into AI for this type of thing so we get good decisions. I would like to see whether AI could do a better job or not than these stewards. That is an interesting question, and even Carlos Sainz says, it's a shame that the guy that's dominating and winning everything is getting away with this, while all of us others are getting penalties this year. When I say everyone has pretty much had penalties. So yes, it's a bit strange that Verstappen, who's winning everything, is also getting away with this stuff. So yeah, the drivers aren't happy with it. There was also the FIA rumoured to be confirming now that almost all the other applications for getting on the grids have been rejected, so high-tech, etc., they're not going to be there. But Andretti is reportedly a successful team through this process, and if it does get through the final stage of approval, Formula 1 will have a difficult time rejecting them as the 11th team per our understanding. Let's get into qualifying then, because it began with a bang with Logan Sargeant straight at the wall. And this was just such a funky crash, because he comes out of the final chicane. You don't usually crash it. It's possible to lose the rear of the car here, but he kind of lost the rear, and he could have just saved the car and said, all right, I've got to abort this lap. It's obviously frustrating to abort the lap just before the finish line, but that's probably what he should have done. He kept his foot in, though, and was hoping the car would right itself. It didn't. He went off track, and in a reminiscent way, in some ways, to Charles Leclerc in Zandvoort, once he was off the track, he just, no grip on the tyres, obviously, straight into the wall. And the Williams crew were just head in hands. Like, as soon as I saw a Williams in the wall, it's like, oh, who could it possibly be? Obviously, it's Logan Sargeant. And the difficulty is for Sargeant is that his best races of the year were Bahrain and Jeddah, really. The first two races of the season. He's not improved, really, at all. James Vowles was on with Sky saying that, like, it's not great, the crash damage repairs that we have from Logan Sargeant, because he's definitely topping the World Destructors Championship for crash damage that he's imparted on that Williams this season. So not a good look, really. And I know that Vowles wants to keep Sargeant around, and it feels like Williams do. But you've got to think, Piastri has turned up here today as a rookie, his first ever Japanese Grand Prix, on the front row, outqualifies his teammate. I mean, Piastri's done a stellar job. Lawson turns up. Lawson, let's not forget, by the way, first race, dreadful conditions in Zandvoort, has to step in for Ricciardo, keeps it out the wall, has a solid race, finishes P13, goes to Monza, does well, and then Singapore, very tough track for a rookie. There were crashes there, there were mistakes there were issues. Lawson keeps out of trouble, does a stellar job, gets points. It's like it's not impossible for rookies to do incredibly well. And we know that the best rookie season ever, there's a couple of candidates, but Hamilton 2007, I think, is pretty much unanimously considered the best ever. And, obviously a phenomenal season for Hamilton. But at the time, rookies could do a load more testing before they came into Formula One. That's not necessarily so much the case nowadays. So the question has been, can rookies actually be that good anymore? Can they come in and immediately be top drivers? Well, I think we've seen they still can. Piastri and Lawson have been good examples. Sargeant hasn't been that guy. And you gotta think that Williams are thinking, it reminded me a little bit of when Mick Schumacher went into the wall last year. I think there was actually the checkered flag had fallen and he was working his way back to the pit. It was wet and he binned it in the wall. And Steiner at that point was like, I'm not getting this guy back to Haas. I can't be bothered anymore. I'm not paying for any more crash damage repairs than Mick Schumacher. And that felt like the final straw. Schumacher's crash in Suzuka last year, and Sargeant's now had a crash in Suzuka. Is that the final straw? Possibly, but he was out of qualifying. Stroll also out of qualifying. Man, the Aston Martin has regressed so much. They were, in Bahrain, this year's Aston Martin was 2.4 seconds a lap faster than last year's Aston Martin at Bahrain. Last year they developed quite well, and in Suzuka, they were a 10th slower this year, or 10th slower last year than they were this year. So the gap between the AMR 22 and the AMR 23 was 2.4 seconds in Bahrain. It's now like a 10th in Suzuka. So they've gone the wrong direction with their development, no doubt about it, and they've regressed substantially. Alonso, though, does get into Q3. Lawson was just pipped out here in Q2. Tsunoda made it to Q3, which I was happy about because good to see him hopefully have a good weekend here at his home race. But, man, no one was looking past Verstappen here. It was actually insane. And the end of Q2 looked kind of tasty, right? It was pretty competitive. But Verstappen decided, and it was clearly they came into this weekend somewhat angry after the events of Singapore, wanted to really put down a marker. And both of his laps here were stellar. I mean, it was purple, purple, purple. And then his second lap, he gained a 10th through the S's. And then basically went equal, but slight improvements, like a few thousandths better in Sector 2, Sector 3. And that sent him P1 by an absolute mile. I mean, we knew the Red Bull was going to be good around here. And as I said, look, after Singapore, even after the Friday, the Saturday and the Sunday, has the technical directive affected them? We won't really know until Suzuka. But I think Max has gone a long way to answering those concerns today because, I mean, this was how things stood. Verstappen went into the 128s. He just said on the radio, yep, 128, that's nice, isn't it? I mean, yeah, this guy came in with a mission this weekend. The two McLarens, and as I say, Piastri, massively impressive. Last weekend, he didn't have the full upgrade package, right? Only Norris did. This weekend, they both have the full upgrade package, and Piastri outqualifies Norris at a circuit that he's never qualified at before. So, incredibly impressive from him. The two Ferraris were further behind. Sainz finally gets done by Leclerc after the last few races, and this was actually right before the final laps were about to come through, because Hamilton did a lap on the older soft tyres, Russell did one lap on the only fresh set they really had, and then Hamilton went a second behind. So, Hamilton was pretty happy with the car. This is the thing. He said after the qualifying session, we'll see in a second, they made big improvements overnight. The car felt pretty good, but he was a second off Max. And Hamilton was like, yeah, 3/10 on George is a pretty good lap from me. But to be so far behind, this is the thing, the McLarens, we know they've developed through the season in the Red Bull direction. And at a circuit like this, heavy aero circuits, the Red Bull just absolutely dominates, and anything that's a little bit like it, such as the McLaren as the direction they've gone in, is going to work really well around here. So, yeah, Max was a mile ahead. The thing is, though, how is Perez 8/10 back? I mean, we've got to have a conversation about this. Perez, I mean, come on, the car's meant to be the same. Okay, sure, Verstappen's a better driver. Maybe there's a couple of tenths in it, but I mean, like, how's Perez 8/10 back in P5? Like, that is just so unacceptable. Hamilton was, as I say, he was pretty happy. He wasn't happy, but he was 3/10 up on Russell. I'm sure he was thinking, yeah, pretty good lap from me into the 129s, but just miles off the pace, that Mercedes, which is, and also they don't believe their race pace is going to be great tomorrow because they have felt that their tyre deg has been on par with the Ferraris or not looking so good in the race runs. So, yes, definitely some concerns there for Mercedes. As Hamilton said, we made changes overnight. The car was feeling really good today. I was much happier with it. The laps felt really good, and we're 1 second off, right? Just that is not great feedback because it just shows the car doesn't have what it takes. It doesn't generate the downforce around circuits like this, even when it actually is quite well balanced. So, Hamilton was like, look, we've got to change that for next year. And again, at the W14 showing the same inconsistencies the W13 showed. When one weekend, Singapore looks pretty good. They could have won that race. Next weekend in Suzuka, absolutely nowhere near the pace. But massively fair play to Oscar Piastri and McLaren. I mean, for them to be P2, P3, given where they started the season, is super impressive for them, but still, I mean, it's 6/10 to Max. I mean, and that's 6/10 in quali. Like, let's not forget, the Red Bull is usually half a second a lap faster than the field in race trim. So Verstappen could be a second a lap faster than the cars behind him tomorrow, and if that's the case, surely Perez gets P2, like, you gotta think. But if that is the case, then Verstappen can lap the field. If there's no safety cars issues, he could lap a lot of the field. And he's clearly coming in with the intention to set down a marker this weekend, set down a benchmark. He did it in qualifying by an absolute mile. And, as he said, from the first lap on Friday, it felt good. And whenever that happens for Max, his first lap feels good on Friday, and they've got the setup dialed in from day one. It's just over, especially this season, it's just over. Now, he actually made a few comments on this after the fact, especially with regard to what people said about the technical directive. And it's a funny statement, really, go suck on an egg. I think it's mostly used in American culture for, if someone's annoyed about something, you tell them to do this just to take the mick, really. So there's you can hear the translation in the background, so you've got to listen a little bit carefully to hear him say it, but I'll share it for you guys regardless.
Honestly, yeah, we had a bad weekend. Of course, then people start talking
Obviamente
about,
tuvimos un mal fin de semana y todo el mundo empezó a hablar que se debía a la directiva técnica, pero creo que se pueden ir todos al carajo. Por mi parte,
I was just very fired up to have a good weekend here.
So obviously it was a little coincidental, right, that the bad weekend Red Bull had was when the new technical directive came in, but seemingly it's made no impact to Red Bull, at least based on this weekend. This is the type of dominance you would expect from that car and this driver around this track, and, the TD comes in, hasn't affected that. We'll see if, Perez is 8/10 behind, so maybe there's something in it still, but I think we probably won't see Red Bull suffer at all, apart from circuits that maybe his circuit's a bit bumpier, they might have some issues with, but Suzuka is just, it's almost like it's designed for this car, in the same way that Belgium seems like it's designed for this car in some respects. And, he was actually asked the question as well, Max, like, why is Checo so bad? Or why is he so far behind? 8/10, 7/10? And Max says, no, I can't comment. I can only say our cars are the same. So, Max came in swinging this weekend on the competition and on his own teammate, it seems. This also is pretty funny that in the testing, in the long run pace in practice, the McLarens looked pretty good. The pace, the tyre deg looked pretty good. So as Sean Kelly says, they're a contender to finish on the same lap as Max Verstappen tomorrow. Not a contender to win, obviously, unless Max has some issues. But yes, a contender to finish on the same lap. There was also a bit of controversy during Q1 because, again, these drivers, Zhou, Leclerc and Bottas, were noted for going over the lap time limits that they'd imposed, but the reality was that they weren't blocking anyone. It wasn't really an issue. It's just kind of funny. They have this maximum lap time, but so far no one's actually been penalized for exceeding it. But, so maybe, again, steward inconsistencies, you can talk about that a little bit. But this is going to be the grid for tomorrow. So Verstappen, Piastri, Norris, Leclerc, Perez, Sainz, Hamilton, Russell, Tsunoda, Alonso, Lawson, P11. Then the two Alpines, 12th and 14th. Gasly up to 13th. Sargeant from the back with a brand new rebuilt car. And, the usual suspects. But the gaps in quali here were pretty significant. And you could quite clearly see which cars got the pace and which cars haven't. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.